You thought I wanted to be about stretching, but I really wanted to be about dancing. Just going to say that on record. We get a lot of comments and questions about IT band syndrome, which is like saying, hey, I have leg syndrome. I have this IT band syndrome. I have leg syndrome. I have hip syndrome. It's this nebulous catch-all, meaningless thing. What it usually means is referring to someone has pain at the knee. So remember our upstream, downstream concept. How do we start to address this with our athletes? The very first thing is if you have someone who has an IT band problem, they usually get it from running. Check. So before you throw out the baby with the bathwater, why don't you watch them run? If you see gross faults in their midline stabilization, and if you see the legs swinging around doing crazy things, if you see, we had a young person come in today and it was just missing some of the rotation of their leg, and subsequently we're ending up in a valgus knee. This alone is enough to, if I strike and land like this can cause a definite mechanical problem here. So how do you deal with IT band syndrome if you're a coach? Think about what you know, and let's work upstream and downstream. Primarily, if you think about the iliotibial band, right, attaches from the pelvis down to here, then really what we're going to talk about is it's a big sheet of connective tissue. It's when I was in the anatomy lab, if you peel it out of the cadaver, it's literally very, very thick. It looks like a sheet of steel. It looks like you could suspend a car from a bridge. And not only is it a big sheet of connective tissue onto which your hams attach, onto which your glutes attach, onto your quads attach, but the whole thing dives straight to the bone, straight to the femur, and creates a T-band, like an I-beam. So it creates an anterior compartment and posterior compartment. So if you think you're going to stretch a piece of connective tissue, no way. All right? It's too thick. So here's what we're going to do. What can I do about my T-band syndrome? One is that I can always make sure that I'm working upstream on, let's start with the joint problem. So let's get you thinking about the joint. A nice piece of the joint that always gets tight in these athletes is this kind of high hip, and I found that this is to be very effective. I put my foot up on a box, I let the leg drop out to the side, and then I'm going to just roll around into the corner until I hit back into this piece. Feels like someone's putting a knife here, or it feels pinchy, and I'm just going to oscillate back and forth. Turns out that that capsule piece corresponds very well with this big chunk, which we call the flexor WOD. The flexor WOD includes none other than the TFL, which is the tensor fascia lata. The tensor fascia lata attaches on the IT band and ends up tightening up the whole system. It's a little tiny muscle that gets pissed. But if I can capture that capsule, anything else that's in there, I can do a lot towards removing the restriction and improving my range of motion. So you'll feel like, hey, that's a spot that's actually attached to this driver. We often see that people who have ID band syndromes also have really weak butt. So getting them cueing into what butt works because the butt attaches onto that IT band. Hey, which means the next piece. So let's do this. I want you to spend some time. You got 5 minutes each leg. You're going to spend a minute or two into this fine and see if you can find that position. And when you wind that up, you might even be aware of some lateral tension in the hamstring. Remember, we're trying to or not the hamstring, but in this kind of lateral compartment, you're trying to bi-slack down to the lower leg. So hit out, camp back and forth. That's homework number 1. Number 2, let's get your trusty pain ball out, and we're going to stick that thing in the flexor WOD. You wish we were rolling like this, but instead we're going to be on the ground. And I want you to drive that thing into that big meaty piece of flesh here. And I want you to pancake those fibers back and forth. So hit it, don't just drop on it and drive it right into your hip, but I want you to pancake the fibers back and forth. Let's get a minute here, unglue that business, right on that lateral hip. Next, we think, hey, what are the pieces that attach into this IT band? Well, quads end up being a big piece, hamstring ends up being a big piece. One of the things we can do with foam rolling is to try to make sure that I restore the sliding surface quality and nature of the kind of independent tissues here. It's easy to then get the ball in on the interface of the quadriceps on the IT band and hamstrings on the IT band, and so I can go ahead and fully explore these areas right down here. Don't be naive to think you're going to actually stretch the IT band. Just go ahead and get that ball in around those tissues, and then go ahead and I'm pinning the ball down with my other leg, and I'm just going to pull back and forth a little bit. And what I'm really trying to do is change the interface nature of this lastus vas lateralis into the kind of IT band, into this compartment, and blowing open some of this piece, okay? So that's a big deal. Let's go unglued. And then finally, let's really bias this lateral hamstring as it comes in. So this hamstring head here feeds in, and I'm going to do that by doing the second leg stretch, which is just to, looks like the same position here, doesn't it? Hey, but instead I'm going to go ahead and load up the hamstring and change position until I kind of feel, and I'm just rolling my knee back and forth until I feel this lateral hamstring as it inserts into that kind of big medial quad or lateral IT band area. So right in here, I'll roll around and just hammer that thing. Contract, relax there, 5 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and pretty soon you've got a little recipe. Don't throw away what you knew. No, work upstream, work downstream of the problem, but think critically about what it is you're trying to do. Can you change an inflamed tissue at the local level? Yes, with ice, with fish oil, all of those things. This thing is pissed. You're probably not going to change much of that unless you have some Jedi joint mobility. But what you can do is always feed slack to the system and make sure you're not seeing any deviations in movement. So if someone's squatting and you see their knees come in, you know, we've got a good idea what's going on. If they don't have good butt control, then we have a good idea what's going on. So more of everything resolves this. But once someone's inflamed, get the flames out, buy them some slack. We'll see you tomorrow.